So I just want to look out. In a week's time, we're going to have the U.S. and China imposing tariffs. How are you positioning yourself?
Well, I think that the conversation is on trade wars. So far, this proposal war really is going back and forth, and it sounds there's a proposal that happens, and then certainly in the U.S. we're walking back a little bit too. The reality is, one, the effect certainly on U.S. businesses relative to Chinese businesses and Chinese economy is actually somewhat similar because so much business is done by U.S. subsidiaries, Chinese subsidiaries of U.S. businesses, so Apple and Boeing. Ultimately, the effect on GDP for the U.S. and for China is real, but it's fractional of a percent. I'm more interested in the fact that we've really seen a slowing in both economies over the course of the last year or so, certainly in China, and that's been reflected in a lot of the stock market, the A-share market.
But certainly the equity markets have been affected by these trade wars.
For sure,
yeah.
For sure. It's been accelerating a bit to the downside, but it's really on top of, it's maybe the straw that's making the camel's back a little creaky, right? Maybe not breaking it, but we've already seen a succession of sort of weaker data and more challenging economic environment, just as global central banks remove liquidity from the marketplace.
So then what about the emerging markets? Because emerging markets look as though they're getting pounded.
Right.
So what is going on there?
Well, I mean, emerging markets is kind of a silly category, right? And it contains things like China and Brazil and Turkey, and those countries are very different. Their situations are very different. One thing that they do have in common, though, is really having to deal with the strength of the U.S. dollar. And I would actually expect that to continue as the Fed continues to raise rates. So, look, at Thornburg, we're looking at individual securities fundamentals, but as we look at that, there really is the backdrop of, what does that stronger dollar mean for a lot of companies in emerging markets.